Happy morning all. So today I'll be discussing about the basic topic, the oral ovulations, the oral medications which we use for ovulation induction in our day-to-day practice. After that, I'll discuss 2 or 3 files. So let us go. All of you are able to hear my voice, right? Any problems?
We're able to hear, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So coming to the aims of ovarian stimulation. So the main aim is for the development of one or more ovarian follicle to reach the stage of maturity, culminating in the release of one or more mature oocytes ready for fertilization. So we are giving ovarian stimulation even for a non-ovulated, in anovulatory conditions like PCO and all, to make one follicle grow and make it reach to maturity. That is to reach around 18 to 20 mm and then give HCG trigger and then plan for TI or IUI cycles and all. So the main is of the ovulation induction is monoovulation. We don't want multiple follicle development. We want only one follicle development. And also in a case of PCO and all, we will do a controlled ovarian hyperstimulation. So that is, there will be multiple follicle developments in a mild stimulation IVF procedures and all. We can use the same oral ovulogins to prepare the patient for IVF. That is, we use it for mild stimulation IVFs that we will explain you in detail. But otherwise, if you're trying for a timed intercourse cycle as well as for IUI, it is only monoovulation which is required. So the goals of ovarian inductions are: one is to induce monofollicular development and ovulation in anovulatory infertile women, to augment the, especially, and also in unexplained infertility, usually the ovulation will happen. So egg development will also happen properly, follicular development, but here we'll augment the ovulation in unexplained infertility. And also when we give HCG, we can they can have intercourse in the particular time where ovulation can happen better and the success rate will be increased. And also it maximizes the rate of singleton pregnancy. And also by giving ovulation induction in a controlled manner, we can minimize the risk of OHSS. Coming to anovulatory disorders, so if 5 to 10% is WHO category 1, that is hypogonadotropic hypogonadism. So here mainly FSH and estradiol value is important. So here both are, it will be less. But majority of the anovulation comes under the category of WHO category 2, that is eugonadotropic, euestrogenic anovulations, that is polycystic ovary disease. So here the FSH and estradiol values are less. So, and another 10 to 20% of the category belongs to WHO category 3, that is hypergonadotropic anovulation. Here the FSH and estradiol values will be more. So, and another category is hyperprolactinic anovulation. Sometimes in day-to-day practice, what we do is we just check hemoglobin, sugar, and thyroid value, and we tend to forget this prolactin value. This prolactin value is very much important. If the prolactin value is more, one thing is ovulation cannot happen properly. One is follicle development will also be hampered, and also ovulation will be hampered. And also these patients where prolactin value is more, they tend to have luteal phase defects. So always check prolactin value when a patient comes with infertility to your clinic. So even hyperprolactinemia may lead to defect in the ovulation as well as luteal phase defects. Coming to methods for ovulation induction, one is treating the cause for anovulation, medical induction and surgical inductions. So treating the cause, first what we have to do, if the patient weight is more, we have to ask them to reduce the weight. Especially in a PCO patient, first step is at least 5% of the weight reduction. Lifestyle changes and regular exercise. If the prolactin level is high, we have to treat hyperprolactinemia. And also if she is hypothyroid, correct the TSH value and then start the stimulation. Coming to weight loss, obesity associated with failure of infertility treatment. Weight loss of at least 5% improves the spontaneous ovulation rates. Lifestyle modification is the first line treatment for obese PCOS. So medical induction can be done with many agents. So most commonly used is SERMs, selective estrogen receptor modulators, that is clomiphene and tamoxifen. The others are aromatase inhibitor, gonadotropins, and pulsatile GnRH. The most commonly used is clomiphene, tamoxifen, and aromatase inhibitors. Coming to clomiphene citrate, it is a synthetic non-steroidal anti-estrogen, that is, it belongs to category called SERMs. So here, it is the first anti-estrogen approved by US FDA in 1967. It is widely used for the past 45 years for ovulation induction. These SERMs have tissue-specific agonist and antagonist activity. Mainly, the SERMs bind to the estrogen receptors. I think this part of the screen is not visible. The SERMs bind to the estrogen receptor and they have a tissue-specific effect that allows them to function as estrogen agonist in some tissue and estrogen antagonist in other tissues. So clomiphene citrate is a synthetic non-steroidal anti-estrogen. This I've already explained. Now coming to the mechanism of action. Clomiphene citrate binds to the estrogen receptors and causes depletion in the receptor concentration. It goes and binds to the estrogen receptors in the hypothalamus and the pituitary. So the depletion of the estrogen receptors in the pituitary and hypothalamus due to prolonged stimulation goes and binds to the receptors. So that receptors are blocked for a long time and there is receptor depletion. So what happens when the receptors are blocked? The hypothalamus and the pituitary, what they sense? So this estrogen feedback loop gets interrupted. So negative feedback of the estrogen on the FSH is altered. So the FSH secretion is increased, leading to multiple follicle growth. And also there is a peripheral anti-estrogen effect and it has a longer half-life. It goes and binds to the receptor in the hypothalamus and the pituitary. What the central system senses that the estrogen level is very less in the body. That negative effect is lost. So, and also what happens, they start, since the receptors are blocked, the FSH increases, FSH secretion is increased. As the FSH secretion is increased, they stimulate the follicular development. So more, and also like mainly like few follicles which are good, which have lot of FSH receptor gets stimulated. So more smaller follicles are rescued and even smaller follicles are also, sometimes more than one follicle might get developed. So here by using clomiphene citrate, it is not like monofollicular response, which is seen in aromatase inhibitors. Here sometimes multiple follicular development can also happen. And also the long life of clomiphene citrate is slightly high. So clomiphene citrate is a mixture of estrogen agonist and antagonist. Estrogen, that is N-clomiphene and Zu-clomiphene, both are there. So usually CC as a 62% of N-clomiphene and 38% of Zu-clomiphene. N-clomiphene is anti-estrogen centrally. And also it has an estrogenic effect on the cervix and endometrium, which is good. Whereas this 38% is composed of Zu-clomiphene, they act in an opposite way. That is, they are estrogenic centrally. They have anti-estrogenic peripherally. That is on the cervix and endometrium, they have anti-estrogenic effect. Because of this 38% of Zu-N-clomiphene, the main side effect of the clomiphene citrate is anti-estrogenic in the cervix and the endometrium. In few patients, cervix may not be favorable in a TI or IUI cycle, and also the endometrium may not grow properly. So that is the main side effects. Though coming to N-clomiphene, so it is anti-estrogenic centrally. So it has a property of ovulation induction. It is estrogenic peripherally. So it increases the cervical mucus, endometrial thickness, and also half-life is very less, that is 24 hours. So less resistance in patients. So mainly the side effects are mainly because of this Zu-clomiphene. Just 1 second. So this already I've explained. Because of this Zu-clomiphene, anti-estrogenic effect is seen peripherally. Coming to the drawbacks of Zu-clomiphene. So Zu-clomiphene mainly has a longer half-life. All side effects is because of that 38% of that product. So it has a longer half-life, so slow elimination in the body. So, and also it results in multiple follicle development, resulting in multiple pregnancy. And also it has anti-estrogenic effect on the endometrium. So endometrial thinning may be seen, and also anti-estrogenic on the cervical mucus. So thick, like poor cervical mucus. If the cervical mucus is very thick, what happens? The sperm cannot penetrate properly. If the estrogenic effect is seen on the cervical mucus, means this mucus will be very thin, with which the sperms can pass through easily. Whereas if there is any anti-estrogenic effect, they becomes very thick, so that sperms cannot penetrate. Because of the longer half-life, the resistance is seen in patients. Around 15 to 40% of the patients may have resistance to clomiphene citrate. All these side effects is because of this zooclomiphene. So mainly, what are the benefits of enclomiphene? Enclomiphene scores over the cis isomer in terms of it has a good follicular growth, resulting in it induces ovulation. It improves the endometrial thickness, that is, it builds up endometrial lining. No abnormal luteal phase morphology is seen. So good quality of cervical mucus, which is desirable for better sperm transport, and it has a shorter half-life, that is 24 hours. It gets eliminated from the body faster. Coming to the study, a comparison of effect on follicular development between clomiphene citrate, it's two separate isomers and spontaneous cycle. 26 normal prolactin women were given with clomiphene citrate. Women treated with 100 milligram of clomiphene citrate daily from day 2 of the first cycle for 5 days. Following a washout cycle, were then randomized to receive 50 milligram of either enclomiphene and zooclomiphene isomer daily from day 2 of the third cycle for 5 days. So the enclomiphene 50 mg compared to the clomiphene citrate 100 mg. So here, when clomiphene citrate 100 mg was given, the number of follicle reaching more than 16 mm was around 2.4 follicles. With enclomiphene, it was 2.1, whereas with zooclomiphene 50 mg, it was only 1.2. So what literature has to say? Zooclomiphene gets accumulated for a longer time in the body, and it is detectable in circulation even after 1 month of treatment, and may actually accumulate over consecutive cycles of treatment. So enclomiphene disappears rapidly from the circulation less than 24 hours. Zooclomiphene is unable to induce ovulation due to its estrogenic nature. So coming in this study, what they have done is, in the first cycle of ovulation induction, they have given clomiphene citrate 100 mg from day 2 of the cycle for 5 days. So they have seen like how many follicles reaches more than 16 mm with clomiphene citrate 100 mg. So 1 month they have given washout period, because zooclomiphene stays in the body for 1 month. So second cycle, there was no ovulation induction. It was called as washout cycle. And in the third cycle, the ovulation induction with either only the zooclomiphene or enclomiphene, they have separated and they have given separately to different patients. That is 50 mg of either enclomiphene or zooclomiphene was given on the third cycle. So they have compared the first cycle with only CC 100 mg and the second cycle where half of the participants were divided between enclomiphene and zooclomiphene. So with this, they have noted which is better, clomiphene or enclomiphene or zooclomiphene. When we see the clomiphene 100 mg, the follicular development was good. That is 2.4 follicles are developed. With only zooclomiphene, it had ovulation induction was not very good because of its estrogenic property. Coming to pharmacokinetics, clomiphene is readily absorbed orally. It has a very large volume of distribution. It has a high bioavailability. It reaches the peak plasma concentration within 6 hours. Normally, the half-life is 5 days for clomiphene citrate. It is metabolized in the liver by cytochrome P450 pathway, and there is evidence of enterohepatic recycling. It is excreted in feces and minimally in urine. So whenever the LFT is compromised or the patient has any chronic liver disease and all, when you are doing stimulation with clomiphene citrate, you should be very careful because it is metabolized in the liver. So indications, it is the ovulation induction of choice for type 2 WHO group of anovulation. That is, earlier clomiphene citrate was the treatment of choice for a PCO patient. Now they tell letrozole is the treatment of choice, and in luteal phase defects. And also we can use it for mild stimulation in IVF stimulations. And also in few cases like prevention of ovulation, this I will comment in detail in later. Coming to contraindications for using clomiphene citrate whenever there is chronic liver disease. And on day 2 of the cycle, if the patient has ovarian cyst, you cannot start stimulations. And also if the patient has abnormal uterine bleeding of undetermined origin, if the patient has DOB and you have not found out the cause, and if there is any pituitary tumors, or if the patient is hypersensitive to drug. In the previous cycle, if she has taken and if she has any adverse reactions, then. And also whenever the patient has optic neuropathy or scotomas, whenever there is a high disorders, don't give this clomiphene citrate. I'll explain why it should not be given, and also in pregnancies. Coming to side effects, it is mainly related to the estrogen. So when because of anti-estrogenic effect, they may have a mood swing, most common, and hot flushes are seen in 10% of the cases. Abdominal distension and bloating is seen in 5% of the cases. Breast discomfort is seen in 2%, nausea, vomiting in 2%, and visual symptom, especially they will have floaters and flashes. Coming to the visual symptoms, why this visual symptoms happens? So by giving clomiphene citrate, in few of the cases they have studied, there will be clotting of blood in the retinal vessels. So few patients may experience this eye symptoms like scotomas, floaters, flashes, and all. They'll have a visual disturbance. Whenever the patient complains of visual disturbance after giving clomiphene citrate, immediately it has to be stopped, because they are the end arteries. If they are damaged, then they will have impairment in the vision. So be careful about these symptoms. We tend to ignore this because they are very rare. Sometimes many cases have been reported with the visual symptoms. Coming to the dosages, clomiphene citrate can be administered in 50 milligram doses for 5 days from day 2. Either from day 2 of the cycle up to day 5, we can start clomiphene citrate giving for, usually we give it for 5 days, and increase progressively up to maximum of 150 milligram per day for 5 days. So if they don't respond for 50 milligram this cycle, you can give 100 milligram next cycle, and then you can increase up to 150 milligram. So maximum in day-to-day practice, they give up to 150 milligram. Only like 250 up to 250 they tell, but it is rarely used, not commonly used between 150 to 250 dose. So LH surge occurs 5 to 12 days after the last dose of clomiphene citrate. They have studied after giving clomiphene citrate, after stopping that from the last day of the tablet, for how many days long the ovulation, like this LH surge will happen. On an average, it is 5 to 12 days. So 52% of the pregnancies occurs with 50 milligram of clomiphene citrate, and 22% in 100 milligram, and 12% with 150 milligram of clomiphene citrate, and 5% is seen with 250. Usually we don't go with 250. If they are not responding, either we change the drug, change the protocol. So more than 100 milligram, usually FDA says stick only up to 100 milligram, not more than that. Few papers says up to 150 we can use. So ovulation rate is seen in 70 to 92% of the cases, and pregnancies documented by ultrasound is seen in 36% of the cases, and the live birth rate is 29%. So there are disparity. See, the ovulation is happening in 70 to 92% of the cases, but here the early pregnancy confirmed by scan is only 36%. There is a lot of discrepancies. So why this discrepancy is happening? One is the main causes anti-estrogenic effect on the endometrium and the cervical mucus. So it is acting on the ovaries, the follicles are developing properly and ovulation is happening. But same time, it is having anti-estrogenic effect on the endometrium and the cervix. So that is one of the cause for the lower success rate, and also decreased uterine blood flow, and also impaired plasma protein 14 synthesis, and also subclinical pregnancy loss are seen. And also it has a negative, few studies says they have a negative impact on tubal transport. That is, instead of the tubes moving in a direction from ovaries towards the uterus, by that they take up the oocyte, then zygote is formed, and then it has to get back to the uterus. Here the tubal transport will be affected in few cases with clomiphene citrate, and also they may have a detrimental effect on the oocytes, which it is not seen in majority of the cases. Only in few cases they have noted this. So main drawbacks are clomiphene citrate failure, that is failure to conceive in 6 documented ovulatory cycles. So that is CC failure. So here you have given clomiphene citrate, there is ovulation which is happening properly. Even in 6 cycles, ovulations is seen, but pregnancy is not happening. That means it is clomiphene citrate failure. So clomiphene citrate resistances, here the ovulation will not happen even if you give 150 milligram of clomiphene citrate for 3 cycles. So failure to ovulate with maximum dose of 150 milligram in 3 cycles. If they are not responding, then change the drug and add gonadotropins. So why this resistance happens? So this clomiphene citrate resistance is most commonly seen in polycystic ovary disease. So most commonly it is mainly like whenever the CC is not acting, you have given 50, then you have increased to 100, then increased to 150. Still, there is no ovulation, there is no follicular development. So you have to find out why this is happening, what modifications we can do. Most commonly, it is seen in polycystic ovarian disease patients, which we see in day-to-day practice every day. So what we have to advise is, one is weight loss, at least 5% of the weight loss. Next is, instead of giving for 5 days, we can give it for 7 days, extended use of clomiphene citrate. And also we can start with glucocorticoids, dexamethasone, along with stimulation for a PCO patients. And also we can add insulin sensitizers, especially metformin we can add. And also we can use gonadotropins along with clomiphene citrate, we can add gonadotropins. And also if the patient is if the ovarian volume is more than 10, AMH is more than 7, and AFC is around 20, 25 lakh, even the AFC is more, we can consider laparoscopic ovarian drilling, do a laparoscopic ovarian drilling, and then proceed with ovulation induction. And also if there is so much of resistance, 1 cycle prior to starting ovulation induction, we can give a oral contraceptive pill. So, and we can use other adjuvants. What are the other adjuvants? Suppose you have done a ovulation induction to a patient. So you have given for 7 days of clomiphene citrate, but on day 12 or day 13, you're seeing the endometrium is very thin, like 10 mm, 12 mm, endometrium is thin. So in those cases, we can use adjuvants, like we can give estrogen supplementation to increase the blood flow. We can give Ecosprin to increase the blood flow, and we can add sildenafil citrate, L-arginine sachets, like that. There are other drugs to increase the endometrial thickness as well as to increase the blood flow. Those adjuvants we can use to increase the success rate. So coming to the study. So here, Shweta. Coming to a study where they have used extended clomiphene citrate treatment in clomiphene resistant women with PCO. A randomized controlled trial was published in 2008 in Reproductive Biomedicine Online. So in this, what they have done is they have taken 318 patients. So they have done 802 cycles. So in that 160 patients, they have given clomiphene citrate 100 milligram for 9 days from day 2 onwards. So in another category of the patient, in 158 patients, they have given HMG 75 IU for 5 days, starting from day 3. So out of 318 patients, they have divided 160, they have given CC 100 mg for 9 days. And for another 158 patients, they have given HMG 75 IU for 5 days starting from day 3. So in that, in clomiphene citrate category patients, they have seen that ovulation rate is 28.1% and pregnancy rate is 11.4%. Whereas when only HMG was used, 75 IU, the ovulation rate was 57.6% and pregnancy rate was 20.2%. The conclusion is extended clomiphene citrate is not more effective than HMG. If we compare extended letrozole with gonadotropins, extended clomiphene citrate is not that very effective. So the modest ovulation and pregnancy rate is seen in extended clomiphene citrate. So if we can say, if we give clomiphene citrate for 5 days, there is no response in those cases. Slight increase in ovulation rate and pregnancy rate may be seen by giving extended clomiphene citrate, but not compared to the gonadotropins. So the side effects were same with extending the regime, and unwanted effects of clomiphene citrate are not related to the dose and duration of the treatment with clomiphene citrate. So these are cheap and effective HMG are costly and they have to come to the hospital. They have to take injections. It is invasive. Whereas giving extended clomiphene citrate is cheap and safe. They can take at home. It avoids unnecessary hospital visits. So, but success rate is not that very good. So now coming to the other protocol which they have used. So all these things we will explain you with the ovulation induction protocol. This is, I'm just explaining how this medication can be used in different scenarios. Okay. So here what they do is, this is called a stair-step protocol. Here clomiphene citrate 50 mg is given for 5 days. So see the ultrasound between day 11 to day 14. If there is no response, then you can give CC 100 mg for 5 days. So USG for 1 week, if no response, increase to 150 for 5 days, then do the ultrasound. This we are not going to do because it is not commonly practiced, because so the patient will not come so much long for the follow-up. They'll go to another doctor. So here, if there is no response in one cycle, the next cycle, we have other alternatives, like we can use letrozole, we can use gonadotropins and all. So that can also be used. And this is one novel therapy, novel protocol called a stair-step protocol. You should be aware of this. But in practice, it is difficult to do practically because we have other better options for ovulation induction. The results of this protocol was the time to ovulate was 32 to 53 days. To catch hold of the patient for so long just for ovulation induction is difficult. So 32 to 53 days less with the stair-step protocol compared with traditional regime. The ovulation rate was 64% at 100 milligram with stair-step protocol compared to 22% with a traditional regime. So conclusion, not necessary to induce menses prior to increasing the CC dose in unresponsive PCOS. But this we will explain you in detail with more studies in the protocol itself. How long should we continue clomiphene citrate in anovulatory women? So here the ESHRE PCO, they had a consensus group in 2007 and they have concluded that you limit to 6 ovulatory cycles and maximum 12 cycles in ovulating women. So how long can we give clomiphene citrate to a woman for ovulation induction? They were telling if the ovulation is happening, limit only to 6 cycles of ovulation. So with 6 cycles of clomiphene citrate, ovulation is happening, but there is no pregnancy, don't use the same drug, change over. And also like we can all together, we can do ovulation induction for maximum 12 cycles in a ovulating women, not more than that. No, all together, all the things around 12 cycles they tell, with CC only limit to 6 cycles. So what are the adjuvants and combinations? So this includes clomiphene citrate with glucocorticoids. Most commonly we use DEXA. We can give clomiphene citrate with metformin in a PCO patients. And also like we can do a preliminary suppressive therapy with oral contraceptive pills. And also we can give L-carnitine, clomiphene citrate with L-carnitine and L-arginines. So coming to clomiphene citrate and dexamethasone in the treatment of clomiphene citrate resistant PCOS. 80 patients were taken in this study, which was published in 2006. So out of 80 patients, 40 were given clomiphene citrate 100 milligram from day 3 to day 7 and dexamethasone 2 milligram day 3 to day 10. So in another 40 patients, clomiphene citrate 100 milligram was given from day 3 to day 7 and a placebo was given. So where dexamethasone was used, ovulation rate was 75% and pregnancy rate was 40%. Where placebo was used, ovulation rate was 15% and pregnancy was 5%. So conclusion is CC with dexamethasone, higher ovulation rate and pregnancy rate. It has a less anti-estrogenic effect on the endometrium and it is independent of age, BMI, duration of infertility. So how does dexamethasone helps? So dexamethasone acts directly on the pituitary gland to suppress the action of estradiol, which may be involved in the process of induction of ovulation by glucocorticoid clomiphene treatment. It may directly influence the follicular development. So dexamethasone may act indirectly by increasing the serum growth hormone, serum insulin-like growth factor, and consequently follicular fluid insulin-like growth factor 1 concentrations. So dexamethasone enhances the FSH stimulated follicular steroid production. So it has multiple roles. One is it controls the estradiol actions at the center, and it also at the follicular level, it increases growth hormone, it increases the insulin like growth factor 1, and also FSH stimulated steroid production. So, and also the synergism of DEXA with FSH in follicular progesterone production and its inhibition by transforming growth factor beta. It indicates that glucocorticoids and TGF-beta interaction may be necessary for granulosa cell differentiation as follicle matures through preantral stages. And also what dexamethasone has also role in the granulosa cell proliferations and progesterone production in short. So it also helps in the conversion of this preantral follicle to antral follicle and follicular maturation. So in short, it helps in follicular maturation, it helps in the granulosa cell proliferation, and it helps in the progesterone production. So suppression, and also it helps in the suppression of adrenal production of androgens. It reduces the androgen level, which should augment the action of clomiphene, facilitating the growth of ovarian follicles by causing an increase in FSH value. So it reduces the high pulsatile level of LH seen in the PCO, which contributes to anovulation. So there are multiple roles of this dexamethasone. So in short, if we take in this slide, one, it reduces the LH level in a PCO patients, and also it reduces the adrenal androgen productions, and also it helps in progesterone production, granulosa cell proliferations, and also maturity of the follicles. Someone has raised hands. So if you have any doubts, yeah.
Can we ask or later?
I think later can we take one?
Okay.
Because,
sorry. Yeah.
if we waste time now, I won't get time to discuss the cases.
Okay.
Yeah, write down all the questions we'll discuss at last.
Okay.
Okay. CC with metformin. By giving metformin, it reduces the fasting insulin, it reduces the androgens, and it decreases the glucose, and it also has an antioxidant action. So coming to the role of metformin for ovulation induction, this was published by ASRM in 2017. So there is insufficient evidence to suggest metformin alone increases the pregnancy rate or live birth rate compared to placebo. This is a grade C evidence. So, and also there is good evidence that metformin in combination with clomiphene citrate improves ovulation and clinical pregnancy rates, but does not improve live birth rate compared to clomiphene citrate alone in women with PCO. So most important is by giving clomiphene citrate with metformin, it increases the ovulation rate and pregnancy rate, but it doesn't have much effect on the live birth rate. Only thing is like ovulation is happening, clinical pregnancy is happening, we can document the early pregnancies. But at last, when we take the live birth rate or take home baby rate, it has not that much effect. And also there is a fair evidence that CC metformin improves ovulation and pregnancy rate compared to CC alone in CC resistant PCO women. So now another category is preliminary suppressive therapy with OCPs. So you are giving ovulation induction, there is no response. So what you can do is 1 cycle prior, you can give a oral contraceptive pills. By giving a oral contraceptive pills, what happens? It suppresses the hypothalamus pituitary axis. It reduces the gonadotropin secretions. It reduces pituitary response to gonadotropins. It decreases FSH, LH, decreases the androgens. Mainly it reduces all these things. So one, it is like that hypothalamus pituitary axis will be like a little bit of under control when we give the OCPs. FSH, LH, especially when the LH is reduced in a PCO patients, the ovulation will be better in the next cycle. Suppose without OCPs on day 2, if you check the LH may be 13, 14, 15. In those cases, even if we give CC for 7 days, 10 days, ovulation may not happen. Same patients, if we give oral contraceptive pills, definitely the LH value on day 2, if you see after giving OCP, so it would have reduced to 3 or 4. Then if you start ovulation induction, then the response will be better. So, and also it, especially in a PCO patient, it reduces the testosterone level, androgen level. So the response will be better when we give the pre-treatment. And also L-carnitine in CC resistant PCO patients. So in this study, what they have done is, they have evaluated the effectiveness of L-carnitine and CC-resistant PCO patient. It was a double-blinded RCTs where 170 patients were involved. The study group, CC with L-carnitine and CC was used. So in one group, they have given clomiphene citrate with L-carnitine, that is 3 grams per day. And in another group, only clomiphene citrate was given. The result was adding L-carnitine when treating clomiphene citrate resistant PCO, patient not only improved the quality of ovulation and the pregnancy rate with an acceptable patient tolerability, but also enhanced the patient lipid profile and body mass index. So by adding L-carnitine, it has improved the quality of it has improved ovulation rate, it has improved the pregnancy rates, and also the lipid profile and body mass index was also, it was like better by giving L-carnitine. So this is about clomiphene citrate. Can I move to the next drug, tamoxifen? So tamoxifen citrate is a potent anti-estrogenic action. So it is also a serum estrogen receptor modulator. It goes and binds to the estrogen receptor, but where it acts as an agonist and antagonist is slightly different from clomiphene citrate. So it is anti-estrogenic on the breast tissues and blood vessels. That's why it is used in the treatment of breast cancers. And it has a partial estrogenic effect on the uterus, the bone, liver, and pituitary. So because of this estrogenic effect on the uterus, in most cases, like usually when the endometrium is thin, we go for a mild stimulation protocols using tamoxifen rather than clomiphene citrate. Or in a ovulation induction patient, if we are using clomiphene citrate or letrozole, if the endometrium is not coming up well, in those cases, tamoxifen is the ovulation induction drug of choice for ovulation induction. So the normal dose is 20 to 40 milligram. Normally we give 40 milligram for ovulation induction. So up to 80 they suggest, but most commonly used is 40 milligram per day. So usually it comes in different dose, 10, 20, 40. So whenever you are ordering in your clinic, just check the dose of the tamoxifen. Give 40 mg for 5 days starting from day 2 or day 5 of the cycle of spontaneously or induced menses for ovulation induction. So now coming to the study which tells about SERMs for ovulation induction in PCO patient, Cochrane review published in 2016. So there is no evidence of difference in the chances of live birth between the clomiphene citrate and tamoxifen group. So here, if we compare which is better, clomiphene citrate or tamoxifen. So they have told in 2016 both are same when we compare the live birth rate. And there was no evidence of difference in the chance of clinical pregnancy between the clomiphene citrate and tamoxifen. And also there is no evidence of difference in the chance of miscarriage between clomiphene citrate and tamoxifen. So almost when we compare the pregnancy rate, when we compare the miscarriages rate, and when we compare the live birth rate, so it is almost both doesn't have much difference. Only difference is the favorable effect on the endometrium. Tamoxifen has a estrogenic effect on the endometrium. So now coming to, like I've not gone in detail about tamoxifen because majority we have discussed in clomiphene citrate and majority is available in the text. If you have any doubt, I'll post it in the group. Now coming to the third drug or the second category of the drug, that is aromatase inhibitors. So what is the mechanism of action? If you start, can you just follow in this figure 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? So you just follow that. So first, number one action is it inhibits the aromatase in the ovaries and peripheral tissue, reducing the estrogen. So aromatase converts the androgen into estrogen. So by inhibiting this enzyme, what happens? The androgens are not converted into estrogen. So estrogen value actually is less in when we use aromatase inhibitor. Whereas in clomiphene citrate and tamoxifen, estrogen value is normal in peripheries, but because of the receptor blockade, the hypothalamus and pituitary senses that estrogen value is less in the peripheries. But here in aromatase inhibitor, actual value of the estrogen is less. So because estrogen is very less, the negative feedback mechanism is removed. So estrogen negative feedback on the hypothalamus and the pituitary is released. So what happens at the level of hypothalamus and the pituitary, there is release of the negative feedback stimulation. Because of the removal of this negative feedback, what happens? There is increase in gonadotropin secretions. So in the figure 4, you can see there is GnRH released. So there is increased FSH stimulation. So there is follicular development. So usually it results in monofollicular development by giving aromatase inhibitor. So, and also the increase in the growing follicles, what happens? They also secretes the hormones, and there will be a negative feedback and mechanism on the hypothalamus and the pituitary. And after some time, even the FSH level starts falling. So because the FSH level starts falling, what happens? Only the good follicle, the dominant follicle, which has a lot of receptors and blood flow, that only grows. The other small follicles, because of fall in FSH value, they undergo atresia. So because they undergo atresia, this results in only monofollicular response rather than multifollicular response with aromatase inhibitor. So I think everyone is clear about this mechanism of action, why monofollicular response happens in aromatase inhibitor. So coming to the dose is around 2.5 milligram per day, starting from day 3 to day 7 of the cycle. So we can start with 2.5 milligram. If there is no response, we can give 5 milligram in the next cycle. Even with that, if there is no response, we can give up to 7.5. Maximum allowed dose is 7.5 milligram per day. So comparison with clomiphene citrate, this letrozole, that is aromatase inhibitor, they have a higher rate of monofollicular ovulation. There is no direct anti-estrogenic adverse side effects on endometrium. They have a shorter half-life of 48 hours. This is one of the advantages. The half-life is only 48 hours. But in clomiphene citrate, half-life was around 5 to 6 days. Because of that, they used to stay for longer time in the body, and the resistance was more with clomiphene citrate. Because letrozole is like aromatase inhibitors have a shorter half-life, the resistance is less compared to clomiphene citrate. And also it reduces the lower serum E2 value, especially in a patient with malignancies where estrogen value should not increase and all. If you have to do ovulation induction, this is the drug of choice because it lowers the E2 value. So normal regular ovulation induction is by giving 2.5 milligrams starting from day 2 or day 3 of cycle for 5 days. Here also we can do an extended regime. Instead of 5 days, we can give up to 7 days to 9 days, up to 10 days they suggest. So that is the regular protocol which we give. Another one is called a stair-step ovulation induction. So this was the study which was published in Fertility Sterility by Wu et al. In 2017. Here what they have done is 49 patients they have given letrozole. So 2.5 milligram of letrozole was given. So ultrasound was done 1 week after the last pill. It was given for 5 days. So ultrasound was done 1 week after the last pill. So if the follicle was less than 10 mm, so increase the dose to 5 mg. Do the ultrasound 1 week later. If the follicle is less than 10 mg, increase the dose to 1.5 milligram. Usually give letros 2.5 for 1 week. See the scan. If the follicle are less than 10 mm, increase the dose to 5 mg. For 1 week, do the scan. Same cycle. That is called a stair step. So in the another group, they have done in 43 patients, they have given clomiphene citrate. Here 50 milligram of clomiphene citrate was given. So USG 1 week after the last pill, if the follicle is less than 10 mm, increase the dose to 100 milligram. So ultrasound 1 week later. So if the follicle is less than 10 mm, increase the dose up to 250 milligram. Usually we don't follow this protocol. This we will explain in detail when we, in another 2 classes when we take ovulation induction proper. So the results is overall ovulation rate with letrose stair step was equivalent to clomiphene citrate stair step. With letrose, it was 95% ovulation rate, whereas in clomiphene, it was 88. Mean time to ovulation and pregnancy rates were also similar for the group, both the groups. So now in the past 3 years, the new protocol, that is stair step protocol has come, but we don't use it most commonly because it takes longer time. Both letrose and clomiphene citrate can be prescribed in the stair step fashions. So another is letrose, we can use a step-up protocol. Here in this, what they have done is in 2015, the study was published. So 100 patients were taken. In that, half of them were given letrose 2.5 mg starting from day 2 to day 3. So increment of 2.3 milligram daily for 3 days was done. So first 3 days 2.5, next 3 days 5, next 3 days 7.5. This they use it, step-up protocol they use nowadays in few cases. So and also in another group, they have given only HMG. So the IUI was done after 36, after ovulation has happened, 36 hours later, like the IUI was done after giving HCG trigger 36 hours later. So the conclusion of this study was the letrozole step-up protocol is potentially valid novel induction protocol that has the privilege of similar pregnancy rates to the standard HMG ovulation induction with lower financial cost and better patient compliance. So in this chart, if you see, the clinical pregnancy rate with the letrozole step-up group was 16%, with HMG 18%. So it is almost equal. Whereas when we had compared this clomiphene citrate with HMG, HMG was better. So if the patient, like if you want to give the success rate, so with less cost and better patient compliance, that is without taking injections, much injections, and to reduce the cost, you can go for this step-up protocols. So 3 days of 2.5, then 3 days 5 mg, then 3 days 7.5. This we will explain you in detail. So the letrozole can be used like that also. So, and also in 2018, the Cochrane review had come regarding the ovulation induction, 42 RCTs with 7,935 women were studied. So pregnancy rate and live birth rate were higher with letrozole, with or without adjuvants compared to clomiphene citrate. Here they have compared letrozole versus clomiphene citrate, and they have compared the pregnancy rates. So it was higher in letrozole group. There is a high quality evidence that OHSS rates are similar with letrozole or clomiphene citrate. So, and also there is little or no difference between treatment groups in the rate of miscarriage or multiple. When we compare this multiple pregnancies and the miscarriage, it was same. But what generally we think is like, since there is a monofollicular response with letrozole, the OHSS chances should be less. But when they have collected the majority of the patient data in 42 RCTs, they were telling, so almost they are similar with letrozole and CC. Technically, it should be less. So, and also there is no increased risk of major congenital anomalies or adverse pregnancy or neonatal outcomes following letrozole use in ART. So what happened earlier, letrozole was in the market. So in between in the US, when they had started using letrozole, they have one doctor had noted in his clinic that majority of the patient had anomalies, fetal anomaly, especially cardiac anomaly and neural anomaly after giving letrozole. So that data came only from a single center, not from the other centers. So immediately it created so much of hype in the media and everyone was so scared, and immediately the letrozole use was banned. So then they started doing RCTs. They did many studies. They compared the anomaly rates with clomiphene citrate, with letrozole and all. So when they did large when they collected all the data and they studied, they noted that the anomalies rates are similar with clomiphene citrate, letrozole, or compared to normal population without ovulation induction. So there was not much changes. So after studying so much data, again the letrozole came into the market. So in the later 2017 and 2018 after the reports. So only because of one center data, there was so much of panic and its use it was banned for longer time. So that's why we don't have much data or much RCTs regarding letrozole. So many studies are ongoing. I think in another 2 or 3 years, we'll have more data about letrozole use. So in 3,136 natural cycles and 792 letrozole-induced cycle associated with fresh or single embryo transfers are resulting in clinical pregnancy were included in the analysis also. The conclusion was letrozole does not increase the risk of major congenital anomalies or adverse pregnancy events or neonatal outcomes compared with natural cycles in patient undergoing ART. So here in one more study, which was published in 2017, they have studied the anomaly rates, the adverse pregnancy outcomes and neonatal outcomes in a normal conceived patients versus letrozole used ART cycles. So in that, they have noted both are similar. There is no increased risk with letrozole. That's why they have labeled it is safe as clomiphene citrate. You can use it. So that is how they have checked about the letros. So the class was for 1 hour. So I've skipped so many slides. If you want, I'll post it in the group regarding the letros. So yeah, please ask your doubts later. I discuss about the cases, 2 or 3 cases.
Excuse me, madam.
Yeah, ma'am.
Madam, you told that we can use DEXA in case of along with CC like that. What
Yes.
about in diabetic patients?
No, it is not recommended to use always DEXA in a patient. It is not recommended, ma'am. In a diabetic patient, definitely their sugar levels will be altered. Only if
Okay.
there is any resistance, to overcome resistance, we can use it. It is not mandatory that along with clomiphene citrate, we
Okay.
have to use dexamethasone always.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Ma'am, usually if the patient is a polycystic ovarian disease patient, usually we tell in a PCO patient, add inositols, metformin along with clomiphene citrate. Start with that because ovulation rates are better when we combine CC with metformin. So that is how usually we started. It is not like only clomiphene citrate treatment for PCO. Along with clomiphene citrate or letrozole, usually we start with metformin and inositols for routine.
Madam, excuse me.
Yeah, ma'am.
Will you use like adjuvants for all the cases or?
No, ma'am, adjuvants is used only when there is no response with the normal dose. Suppose only if you are giving clomiphene citrate, if our endometrium comes up well, it is good. If it doesn't comes up well, then we will give estrogen like Ecosprin, Elarginine sachets and all. So not for all patients, ma'am. If they are normal responders, no need for any other medications. Except for a PCO patients, in a PCO patient, we start with metformin.
Like Ecosprin, what is the dosage?
Ma'am, usually we give 150 milligrams.
For how many days, ma'am? When you will start?
Ma'am, start from like day 5 or day 6 of the cycle.
Okay, okay. Ecosprin. For how many days, ma'am?
Ma'am, it will be continued even during pregnancy.
Fine. It will be continued like that.
Once we
Okay,
start,
thank
we don't stop Ecosprin unless and
Okay.
until it is indicated. Otherwise, we'll continue. But
Madam,
usually, routinely, we don't give Ecosprin only if there is any endometrium is thin, the blood flow is not good in all those cases.
okay, madam. Okay.
Ma'am, are we giving dexamethasone even with letrozole in PCOD patients who are hirsute and have high androgen levels?
Yeah, whenever there is a hirsutism, high LH value, if there is any resistance, we can give dexamethasone. LH value is high if the patient has severe hirsutism, obesity, and hyperandrogenic features. If the testosterone values is more and there is no response to the ovulation induction in the previous cycles, we can give. So until and unless indicated, we don't add steroids, dexamethasone routinely. Only if it is indicated, we will add it.
And ma'am,
Excuse me,
what
ma'am.
is the dose of sildenafil which is added for the thin endometrium and from which daily start?
25 mg 3 times daily. The tablet
And for-
comes as 25 mg. So 3 times daily we will give, that is total 75 milligram per day.
And ma'am, we continue it till the conception then?
No, ma'am, we'll continue. Suppose if it is a IUI, we continue only till HCG trigger, not in the luteal phase. Only when to improve the endometrium. No, once the endometrium is good, the blood flow is good, we will stop it. It need not be continued in the luteal phase.
And ma'am, is there any vaginal preparation for the same?
Yes, vaginal preparation. Usually we give sildenafil vaginal preparations.
So these are 25 milligram vaginal
They come as
tablets.
25 milligram. Yes, ma'am. Even the oral strips like sublingual routes have come. So earlier we used to use this sublingual route, but majority of the patient, they had this headache, dizziness symptoms started. So usually we give vaginal route. So by giving vaginal route, the endometrial thickness and flow will be better compared giving to oral route.
Hello.
Madam, excuse me.
Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah, ma'am. When you will start Sildenafil, ma'am?
Ma'am, suppose like day 8 or day 9, after day 7 onwards, you are doing the scan. So you're feeling that endometrium is thin. That is like it is only 5 mm or 6 mm and the blood flow is not good. Then we will add this 25 milligram 3 times daily. We give it for 3 to 5 days till the endometrium improves. So once it improves, we will stop it. We will not continue.
Okay. Thanks. Madam, excuse me.
Yes,
Hello.
ma'am.
Ma'am, how we will do ovulation induction in case of DVT patients?
So already they had previous history of DVT admitted and on treatment, ma'am.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, one thing is most common is natural cycle. So whether you are doing a TI cycle or IUI cycle, we can give a natural cycle proper trial. If you are going for IUI, mainly natural cycle IUI, or if you are giving, if you want to do ovulation induction, start with low dose, preferably letrozole, because it reduces the E2 value. By reducing E2 value, the chances of DVT are less. And also we have to aim only for monofollicular response, keep the E2 value as less as possible, give like adequate hydration, they should be walking, and also like Ecosprin we can add, and also like after IUI, we can give heparin also as a luteal phase. In the luteal phase, we can give heparin also, ma'am. So letrozole is better because it reduces E2 and also it causes mono-ovulation. So especially when a DVT is there, we should be very careful. We should not hyperstimulate the patient. Avoid gonadotropin as much as possible. Try to stimulate only with oral ovulogins.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. Thank you.
So shall I discuss the case?
Yes, ma'am.
Just 1 second. I will discuss. I'll start with a simple case of ovulation induction. So a couple, wife aged 34 years and husband aged 35 years came to the clinic for ovulation, like for IUI treatment, because they have tried many cycles of TI outside. The details were not known. So when they came here, we started with so on day 2 of the cycle, the follicles on the right side were all less than 10 mm, 6 follicles on the right side, and 6 follicles were noted on the left side. So endometrium was 4 mm shedding. So we started with letrozole 2.5 mg daily once for 5 days. So it started from day 2 of the cycle up to day 6 of the cycle. Day 7. So we called her on day 7 and we did the scan. So on day 7 only the follicle size on the right ovary was 15 mm. The rest are all less than 10. On the left side, the rest were all less than 10 only. So we didn't increase the dose of letrose. We didn't give for more days. Only with 5 doses, the response dominant follicle already 14.5 to 15 mm, one follicle had already developed. So she was continued with folic acid supplementation, and she was called after 3 days. On 10th day of the cycle, her follicle was 20 mm on the right side, and on the left side, there was no dominant follicle. The endometrium was 9 mm triple line gradient. So on day 10, like we gave HCG trigger and planned for IUI. This is how a normal response happens. So usually from day 10 to day 14, we expect a dominant follicle. Here in the day 10 only, the follicle was ready. 1 or 2 days, it may happen early in few patients. Otherwise, this is how a normal response is seen when we start the ovulation induction with letrozole. So this is one. So this patient, same patient. Same patient in one more cycle. So what happened? Same on day 2 of the cycle, her follicles on day 3 only, the follicle less than 10 was around 7 on the right ovary, and on the left ovary it was 5 follicles were there. So for this patient, so Letrozole was given 2.5 milligram, 5 mg was given for 5 days earlier. This was before laparoscopy. So this was before laparoscopy and reducing all the modifications. So when initial cycle, so 5 mg was given for 5 days for this patient. So after giving 5 days, on the 6th day of the stimulation, we called the patient. When we called on the right ovary, the largest follicle was only 10 mm. On the left ovary, the follicles were all less than 8 mm only. There is no dominant follicle on day 7. So Letrozole 2.5, that is 5 mg, was continued for another 3 days. That is total initially 5 days we had given. We had continued for another 3 days, total 8 days of Letrozole, 5 mg Letrozole was given. So along with Letrozole, like 8 days. So alternate days, HMG 75 units was given for this patient. So after giving that much dose on day 11, the follicle was 15 mm. So HMG was given alternate days. So on day 13, the follicle had reached 20 mm in size. So same patient without any laparoscopy and other adjuvants. Earlier on day 13, the follicle had matured with 8 days of letrozole with 5 mg, and also HMG was used for the ovulation induction. So on day 13, the follicle was good size and endometrium was 10 mm. So HCG trigger was given for IUI. So she underwent laparoscopy because there was little bit of fimbrial holding of dye. So after laparoscopy, we had given 1 cycle of OCPs for the suppression and then started stimulation. So with 2.5 mg only for 5 days, she responded well. So after that, so that's how you have to decide. Either you can start with, whenever you are starting stimulation, always start with the low dose. So if it is a first stimulation, starts with 2.5 milligram per day. Give it for 5 days, call the patient for scan on the last day of the Letrozole or the next day, see the response. If there is no response, you can increase, you can give for another 2-3 days, that is extended protocol, or you can add gonadotropins if required. So usually in the first cycle, we don't use gonadotropins, only we will see whether ovulation is happening or not. So after that, depending upon the follicular size, you can call them every 2nd day or 3rd day. Do the scan till the follicle reaches up to 20 mm, at least 18 to 20 mm. And also the endometrium should be good. Ideally, we expect at least it should be 8 to 10 mm, the endometrium. So if the endometrium is 8 to 10 mm and the follicle between 18 to 20 mm with good flows, we can give injection for the follicle rupture and plan TI or IUI cycle. That is how ideally when we are stimulating, we should follow. The other cases I'll just discuss after the prayer. Doctors, we have to start the prayer in another 2 minutes. Kind of cases.
Hello.
Hello, yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, what should be the size of dominant follicle on day 7 when you do the scan?
Ma'am, it depends upon the patient profile. At least 10 mm, we expect at least 10 to 11 mm size. At least it should be there.
But you told in the same patient that it was on day 7 it was 10 mm. But then you extended the dose of Letrozole and you had added the HMG also.
Yes.
How do you decide that you have to give HMG also?
Because the response was less, no ma'am, that's why. And she has underwent 7 cycles of stimulation outside. So this patient, wife age 26 years, husband age 29 years, came with history of primary infertility for 8 years. And she had irregular cycles. Every 2 to 3 months, she used to get her cycles with 4 to 5 days of flow. Coital history was normal. So between 2016 to 2018, they have undergone ovulation induction many times. And also follicular scan was done, which showed follicular size has not increased. None of the follicle had reached 15 to 16 mm, even on day 18, day 20 of the cycle. So in the previous stimulation, they had used clomiphene citrate 50 mg, clomiphene citrate 100 mg, and in few cycles they have used letrozole 2.5 mg was used. None of the cycle the follicle had reached even 16 mm. So she was hypothyroid on tablet Thyronol. So other family history and all all was normal. So in 2016, she has undergone hysterolaparoscopy with septal resection with bilateral ovarian drilling outside. So the septal resection, they had mentioned like bilateral tubes were patent, bilateral tubes are normal, and bilateral ovaries were bulky. So ovarian drilling was done. So on ultrasound, it showed polycystic ovarian disease. So in 2014, so her FSH was 6.7, LH was 13.1, and prolactin was normal. So LH was 13. So in 2014, that is FSH was 6. FSH-LH ratio was altered. So, and then husband normozoospermia. So these were done in different places. And when they came here, when we did this baseline scan, so ovarian volume was 10 cc on the right side with the follicles of 14 to 15. AFC was 14 on the right side. And also on the left side, AFC was 13 and the volume was 6. So even though the AFC was more, the ovarian volume was not like the expected PCO because they have done the drilling. The AMH value was 7.2. So here when we did the baseline in May 2020, our FSH was 2.9 and LH was 3.7. And TSH was 4.1, and by adjusting Theranom, it was well controlled. Husband count motility count was 86 million, motility was 60%, and normal forms was 3%. Others were not, OGCT and other prolactin, other hormones were normal. So she was planned for IUI. So when we started stimulation, they had not used gonadotropin in the previous cycles. So we wanted to start with oral ovulogens first and then add gonadotropins. So for this patient, like one cycle, she had very good response. In the second cycle, there was no response only. I will just explain. In the first cycle, on day 2 of the cycle, there was 14 AFC on the right and 13 AFC on the left side, all less than 10. So Letovol, so 2.5, that is 5 mg per day, 5 days, the tablet was given along with metformin, along with anisitols. And patient was counseled about delayed response and also the chances of cancelling cycle if there is no response, or sometimes they may hyper respond by using gonadotropins. So on day 7, that is on the last day of the that Letovol tablet, on the 5th day of the Letovol tablet, we had called and we did the scan. There is no dominant follicle. All follicles were less than 10 mm only. So we decided to give Letovol for another 2 days. So already 5 days, another 2 days. It was like totally 7 days of letrozole, that is 5 mg for another 2 days. Since there was no response, we started with very low dose of gonadotropin. That is RFSH, we started with 37.5. That is the lowest dose we give. Even 75 HMG usually regularly given day-to-day practice. So because of the PCO, we started with very low dose, that is 37.5 per day. The gonadotropin was started, and every alternate days we did the scan. So after completion of 7 days of Letovol with 3 days of 37.5 unit of RFSH, we called her for scan. So one follicle had come up, that is 11 mm on the right side, and rest were all less than 10 even on the other side. So the same dose of gonadotropin was continued, that is 37.5. So after giving 5 days of 37.5 RFSH, when we did the scan, the dominant follicle started coming. On day 11, on the right side, 13 mm follicle was there. So same dose, since already the dominant follicle had come, so same dose of 37.5 was continued. So on day 13, the dominant follicle was 15 on the right side and 14.5 on the right side. Left side, they were all small. So same dose of gonadotropin, that is 37.5, was given for 2 more days. So ultimately on day 15, so the dominant follicle on the right ovary was 19 on the, and also one more intermediate, that is 14.5 was there. And on the left side, all were less than 10, and endometrium was 9.2 mm triple line gradient. So HCG trigger was given, and the IUI we had planned, IUI was done. So that cycle, it failed. So in this stimulation, we give 7 days of Letovol with low dose of gonadotropin, that is 37.5. We didn't increase the dose since we waited because it takes time. So the response started coming on day 11, but it came up well. So same dose was continued. So since the IUI was failed, so in the next cycle, we planned for ovulation induction with the same precautions, like we gave metformin, inositols, TSH was normal. We counseled in detail about all those things. So we started with Letrozole 5 mg. Here also the same protocol we try to do this cycle also, because using RFSH is costly. If we increase the dose also, the cost will increase to the patient, and also hyperstimulation might happen. Already the patient has responded better for 7 days of Letrozole with 37.5 units of gonadotropins RFSH. We gave the same protocol this cycle for this patient. So when we gave this cycle, the same protocol, on day 11, the largest follicle was 12 mm. On day 13, on day 14 also, the largest follicle was 12 mm only. So after giving 7 days of 37.5 units, there was no response. The largest follicle was only 12 mm. The same patient I'm telling in the next cycle. So since it was 12 mm, what we did, we increased the dose of gonadotropin. Instead of 37.5, we gave it for 7. We increased it to 75. So we gave 75 like international units, totally like alternate days we did scan. Even on day 18, even after giving 75 units of RFSH for 7 days, there was no response this cycle. So largest follicle was still 12 mm on day 19 as well as day 20. So that cycle we had cancelled that cycle. So next, what happened in the second cycle with Letrozole 7 days, no, and RFSH 37.5 for 7 days and RFSH 75 for 7 days, there was no response only. So that cycle was cancelled. This is like this kind of stimulations, it varies from cycle to cycle in a PCO patients. It depends upon the baseline LH value and all. They may not respond usually. So what happened second cycle, we couldn't do anything. IUI was not done. We had just advised TI cycle. So, and also third cycle, since the response was like this, we started with dexamethasone. We added ecosprin to this patient along from the day of stimulation. So same 5 mg Letrozole. Here, gonadotropin, we started from day 3, the dose was 75. So instead of 37.5, in the third cycle, we directly started with 75 units of gonadotropins. So with 75 units of gonadotropins, RFSH, third day itself. From day 3 onwards, only 75 units of RFSH was started along with Letrozole 5 mg. Letrozole was given for 7 days, and this RFSH was continued till day 11. On day 11 itself, the largest follicle was 18.5 and 18. 2 follicle had come. So instead of monofollicular response, here we have seen 2 follicle daily. 75 daily we have given. Almost 8 days of RFSH. So after that, in day 11, this cycle, you can see in this third cycle, same patient on the third cycle, the response was pretty much better. On 11th day only, the follicle was very good, 18 mm size. So it all depends upon here what changes we have done is we have added DEXA in the third cycle. We have added ecosprin, and we have increased the dose of gonadotropin 75. We have started from day 3 itself rather than day 5. We started from day 3. Early RFSH 75 units, 7 days of Letrozole, ecosprin, and dexamethasone. This combination has worked with for this patient daily. They are also 37.5 daily only in earlier cycle. So this patient, this cycle IUI was done, she conceived. So in this cycle. So all those things, like even the same patient, everything is same, they may not respond. So few of the modifications we have to do earlier cycle results. Yeah, ma'am, tell me.
Ma'am, dexamethasone was added because LH was high.
Yeah, ma'am, and also there was no response, no, in the previous cycle. That's why.
And it continues till how long?
Ma'am, this was continued till the UPT, urine pregnancy test.
And dose was 1 milligram daily.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Dexona. BD usually we give.
Ma'am, we give Dexona 1 milligram twice daily.
Twice, ma'am. We are given twice for this patient.
Okay, ma'am. And ma'am, how do we decide where we give Humog, HMG, and where we give recombinant
Usually
FSH?
for this patient, usually we had given BD. Sometimes we give low dose only, even Dexa, very low dose. Yeah, ma'am.
Ma'am, how do we decide where do we give HMG and where we give recombinant FSH?
See, one thing is recombinant FSHs are always better because high purity as well as the response will be good. The disadvantage is the cost. So, and also in a patient where baseline LH is already high, usually better to give RFSH. Suppose if the patient is a normal responder, our LH is less than 5 baseline LH. So if she, and also financial constraint is there, then we can give HMG stimulations.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, as we say that towards the last later part of the follicular development, even LH is needed for the maturation
Yeah,
phase.
after the follicle is 14 mm in size, if you are given RFSH till the follicle has reached 14 to 15 mm. So after it reaches 15 mm, we can convert it into HMG.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Madam, still how long you continue the cycle if you you can in like 14 days, 15 days if you
After
doesn't get
20
the
days. 20 days.
up to 20 days. Okay. Ma'am, this prednisolone, Visalon 5 mg is okay or?
Usually like Vislon, usually we give whenever like after embryo transfer, if they have all these if it is suggested by immunologist and all. Otherwise, for only ovulation induction for TI IUI cycle, usually we give Dexa.
Okay.
Ideally, 1 mg is sufficient per day. 5,000. We don't use 10,000 units here. Only 5,000 we give. 5,000 is sufficient for 1 or 2 follicles. No need to bombard with more HCG. If you give more HCG, there is chances, if the intermediate follicles are more, chances of OHSS will be more. Use how much it is required. 5,000 is sufficient for all cases.
Ma'am, how do we decide in which patients we give Proguanova for the lining thickness to be built up and in which patients we give Sildenafil?
Ma'am, usually we give both Istrabet as well as Sildenafil. Okay, if the endometrium is less than 6 mm, even on day 9, day 10, or day 11 of the cycle, we start giving Istrabet, Sildenafil, and Ecosprin. It is not like we give only Istrabet to one patient, we give only Sildenafil to one patient. See, one thing is if the endometrium is very thin and the blood flow is also less, give Istrabet as well as Sildenafil. And in certain category of the patient, we see the endometrium thickness is good, like it is 7 mm, 8 mm, but the subendometrial flow is less. Mainly the problem is with the blood flow. If the blood flow is less, then add sildenafil citrate.
Ma'am, is there any concern that if we introduce Istrabet earlier, that is going to have a negative effect on the FSH release and it will stall? Is there any?
Usually we start estrogen supplementation once the follicle is more than 14 mm, not before that. If we give before 14 mm, what happens? The suppression of the follicle will happen. Because of the negative feedback effect of the estrogen, the follicular suppression happens.
If the follicle is not in sync with the endometrium, the follicle is already reaching 16 mm and the lining is falling back to only 4.5 or 5.
Cancel the cycle, ma'am. Don't do IUI.
Or is there any role of adding an antagonist, ma'am, along with
if the follicle is already 15 mm, 16 mm, if we add antag, it won't help. Usually we have to start antag between date like when the follicle is between 12 mm to 14 mm. If it is 17 mm, it won't help, ma'am. It won't help much. In the next cycle, suppose the same patient, when you stimulate in the next cycle, then when the follicle reaches 12 mm, you can add antag, control the growth of the follicle so that you'll give 1 or 2 days extra time for the endometrium to grow. In the next cycle, you can do the modification. But this cycle already, if the follicle is 16 to 17 mm, if you antag won't help much.
Okay, ma'am. And ma'am, there are some follicles which do not rupture even with 10,000 international units, and the size and ET, everything is good.
See,
If
one thing is
recombinant,
like with giving HCG if the follicle is not ruptured. So what are the things you have to check? Whether the injection which you are giving, whether the injection was given properly or not. So complete injection dose, whoever has administered, whether the administration was proper or not. The cold storage of the injection was maintained properly or not. What was the batch of injection? Whether with the same batch of injection, other patient has experienced the same thing. So that means that batch of injection may be not good, or the cold chain was not maintained properly. So the same thing, if it has happened, then you can use a recombinant HCGs in the next cycle. Recombinant HCG, that is orbital you can use, or you can use a dual trigger with Leupride and HCG. So change the combination of the triggers. And also there are like 5 to 10% of the cases where luteinized unruptured follicle is seen. It may be genetic or it may be a receptor defect. If there is any LH receptor defect, this kind of ovulation will not happen even with HCG, recombinant HCG, or a Leupride trigger. That we have to consider. One thing is administration is proper and cold chain is maintained properly or not.
ma'am, how is the dual trigger given with leuprolide and HCG?
Leupride 1 mg and this HCG 2000 or 5000 together.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, just one more doubt. Somebody told me that if to check whether your trigger was effective or not, you can do a urine pregnancy
Thing is,
test.
rather than UPT test, you can do a serum beta HCG. Okay. So one thing is the injection is properly administered or not. That we can check it. It is in our hand. So after giving injection, whether it has acted properly in your body or not. So in that patient. So if you are giving a Leupride injection, you can do a serum LH level around 8 to 10 hours after giving the LH and check whether how much is the LH rise. Ideally, after giving Leupride trigger, the LH should be more than 15 international units. That means the injection has acted properly. Second thing is if you are given a HCG trigger. So after, if you give a HCG trigger, so one thing is we take a follicular fluid, and then if we are doing a IVF OPU follicular fluid, we do a UPT, or you can do a serum beta HCG value and check what is the HCG rise. So after giving the Ovitril or HCG triggers. So suppose if the ovulation has not happened 36 hours after giving HCG, draw the blood, send it for beta HCG and check. If you do a CAR test, it may not be that significant. So measuring values, whenever you have a doubt, measure the beta HCG value. So you call the patient at 36 hours and you see that there is no ovulation. So draw the blood and send it, check the serum beta HCG value. Ideally, it should be more than 25 if the injection has happened properly, like it has acted properly. So suppose the ovulation has not happened, serum beta HCG value is good. It means there is no problem with the injection, but it may be problem with the patient receptors, like that. Even after giving Leupride, if the serum LH value after giving injection is good, it means the injection has happened, injection is correct, administration was correct. It may be the patient's defect. Any doubts?
Ma'am, if the HCG levels are good after 36 hours when you have given the injection, there was no rupture. In such cases, recombinant HCG will also not help.
Yeah, usually you can give another 2000 units of HCG, ma'am, and check for after 12 hours. Or you can use a recombinant injection and then check. Any doubts, ma'am? Does anyone has any doubts, anything?
Madam, on the day of induction, day 2 or day 3, If endometrium thickness is 6 or 7 mm, should we start the induction or?
And usually we tell like endometrium should be less than 5 mm when we start the stimulation. That is when the proper down regulation has happened. It means it should be 5 mm.
And suppose, ma'am, it is 6 to 7 mm, then what should be done?
Wait for 1 day, ma'am.
So we repeat the ultrasound next
Yeah,
day.
next day, yes.
And suppose the X-ray is the same.
So usually we do this endometrial coring and then start the stimulation.
Okay. That means if it remains the same, we have to cancel the cycle. We don't have to do the ovulation induction.
No, ma'am. Suppose day 3, day 2 you have checked endometrium was 7 mm and day 3 you have called again it is more means do the endometrial people take out the endometrium and then start stimulation.
Okay.
So ideally we do this for frozen embryo transfers when we are preparing the endometrium. Ideally we wait for a TI cycle or IUI cycle.
And on day 2 or day 3, when we do AFC, we see that there are small multiple follicles on both sides, 1.8, 1.9. Should we go ahead with induction or should we put them on OCPs for one cycle?
No. Follicle size is 1.8 mm or what? 18 mm?
Madam, multiple small cysts if we have on both sides.
Depends upon the size, ma'am. If it is less than 10, usually we proceed with the stimulation 10. If it is more than 10 mm, then we will give OCPs. Will not stimulate.
Okay.
It may be early follicular early follicle which is recruited, or it may be a cyst like clear cyst which is from the previous cycle. We don't know. So ideally, all the follicles should be less than 10 mm when we start the stimulation.
Okay.
Ma'am, there's a patient recently on her day 2 of the cycle. Her scan showed the ET to be 15 mm. And I had stimulated her with Letovel in the last cycle. She got a good egg. She had an ET of 15. But now, without any cyst in the ovaries, all the follicles less than 6 to 7 mm, the ET was 15. I did her serum beta-HCG, that is negative. Ma'am, how should...
Ma'am, wait till day 4. Okay, you can wait till day 4. Check the scan on day 4 of the cycle and see the endometrium. Still, if it is more means, take the endometrium and send it for testing. Whether is there any hyperplastic changes in the endometrium. Please rule out any hyperplasia and then proceed with the stimulation. So on day 2, the endometrium being 15 mm is really unlikely. Either she has not started her menstrual cycle properly. On day 1, she might be having only spotting.
Yes, she has less
Find out
flow.
whether it is only spotting PV or not. Ideally, when the flow starts, there won't be like 15 mm endo. It is really unlikely. So wait for the proper flow to start. Then only start the stimulation. And also in these kind of cases, rule out hyperplasia, endometrial hyperplasia.
Ma'am, when should the patient give the sample for FSH, LH and E2? Because if there is a spotting, should we count it as day 1 or?
No. Only when the proper flow starts, then only you have to consider that day as day 1 of the cycle.